Hi, welcome to section number 4, working with client-driven mutations. After the last section, we can already show a taskboard with some static information, so now it is time to add the ability to add or change lists and cards with our client. You will learn how to trigger mutations via Apl GraphQL client, connect the React client logic with GraphQL, and using the intelligent client-side cache to build an optimistic UI. We will extend our UI for adding and editing new lists and cards, set up and run the mutations in the graphical or playground, and add the functionality for triggering the mutations by the client. Then we will wire up the server with the client logic. Let's start with the next video, exploring the UI for adding new cards and new lists. We will look into the refactored, restructured design and the components. We will take a look into the added UI logic. But first, let's check the component library I added to our project for all the typical standard components like buttons, etc., which I don't want to redesign by myself. So I'm opening the page of Semantic UI React. I selected Semantic UI React because it has a very good React integration, very well known and tested, and it hasn't any jQuery on board or adds some extra JavaScript, and it allows also to use this nice declarative style as we know it from React. And there are some other neat things which you can see on their webpage if you are interested. At the end, Semantic UI React gives us the ability to create a UI with less effort. And now let's look into the new UI. So the new UI, as you can see here, with some demi data, you already see all the buttons here which are new. We can add a new list and add cards here everywhere to these lists. And as you already see, I have scrollers there, so it fills the whole area, and for more lists than fitting on the screen, I have the scroller here. And as you already see on the right side, I opened the React toolkit here to give you an impression of the structure. Of course, here that's already selected is the board title on the top. And below, this is the whole area for containing all the card lists. And each card list itself is consisting of a list container that was needed to have scrolling everywhere. So we have a card list header here and a card at the bottom. And of course, in the inner area, we have all the cards. Currently there's only one. And if I make the screen a little bit smaller or resize here the tools, you will see in a second how I implemented that. So if there are many, so as you can see, I have still the ability to have my add card button at the bottom, which I found is very important for the usability. So but the end, this is how it looks like. And now let's jump into the IDE and see the new restructured components and modules. You see on the left side the UI, and let's check out how I restructured it. In the project we have still our app.js here as our main component. All the other components for the UI are in the components folder. We will have a look into it in a second. First, let me make this smaller and show you the whole file. You see, app.js only contains the main component, which of course has this Apl provider as a wrapper, and then only contains the cool board here, which is imported from that module here. And all the other imports here are just needed to import the functionality for Apl. So this is quite lean and just has the responsibility to wrap our cool board. And the cool board was the GraphQL wrapper for the board. And here we have the board component itself, which is basically this board container with the board title as a name, and then containing all the lists. These are the gray areas on the left side, or the gray blocks that are our card lists. And finally, at the end, as you can see it here, is the new add list button. Finally, let's figure out how a card list is built up. Here you see it has just a render method, so it's a React component with these properties here. And in this list container, of course, we have this card list header, so here the new lists, for instance, and then the inner scroll areas, and of course the add card button at the bottom. So, but that's pretty it. Basically, we have of course the card itself, which is just a card component with some styling here and a name. Of course, I added also here the prop types. So, and finally, I just have only here the board container with a header, and here it contains the children, which are our lists at the bottom. But first, you might wonder where the container comes from. This is of course something we import from the Semantic UI. This container here is also containing the header, which is also a Semantic UI component. And of course I export here the button for adding a new list with its own style and so on. So finally, we should have a short or quick look into where our logic is, because we have to react on these buttons and have some callbacks. For instance, this card list add item here. The card list item is just a function which shows some console output. Also, the board add item button here also will show something. We will see that when I open the console. You should see that when I'm pressing the add card button here or here, I get this output with a specific list ID. And for the overall adding a list to the board, press this button, and this also reacts, showing us this information here in the console. We have all the logic here in the cool board, so in the main board component, let's say. But that's all what we need to handle the functionality at the moment.